my ultimate goal is I think these women are like the best and they compete at the highest level and they deserve to get paid and they deserve to not be big fish in small ponds, to be big fish in big ponds and make big dollars. Media is a very, very critical piece of that.
Welcome to the Navigating Sports Business podcast, where we uncover insights from the most prominent leaders in our industry. Today, I am happy to be joined by Haley Rosen, the founder and CEO of Just Women's Sports. Haley, I'm catching you as you run around New York. We just talked about you having a 1-year-old. I just said you're the founder and CEO of a growing, successful media enterprise. Do you get any rest?
Well, hi, thank you for having me. Yes, early days, no, they were crazy and that was a very different time. But I'm actually really proud to say we're building a machine. So yeah, I get some rest.
That's good to hear. Okay, so we can have a nice, relaxed conversation.
Yeah.
I would assume that most of our listeners, given this is the sports business space and so many of us consume so much content, are familiar with JWS. But for those who aren't, can you give the elevator speech, the quick overview?
Yeah. So the company's called Just Women's Sports, and that's exactly what we are. We covered Just Women's Sports, big focus on WNBA, NWSL, and all these women's sports leagues that are growing. And I think the initial sort of bet was women's sports is here and people are excited and there's this groundswell of interest and audience, and the way that legacy media is set up, it's not set up to grow and build with sort of this new building audience, and that's the role we really want to play. So we love women's sports, we love covering sports, and it's been a lot of fun.
When did you first have that idea? It sounds like it was probably born a little bit out of frustration. You're a former women's soccer player at Stanford, played professionally, wanted to, I'm sure, follow it more and wasn't finding what you wanted. But when did you actually think, you know what, I should do something about this?
Yeah. So the company started in 2020 and really kind of it really was like a crawl, walk, run. It started as literally, I was in a cab in New York. I was with my then boyfriend, now husband at the time, and I was talking about how, I really liked this Instagram account, but why don't they cover more women's sports? Why doesn't someone, do all this but just for women's sports? And we were like, well, anyone can start an Instagram account. Anyone can, start a Twitter. And so that's really that's how the company started, as well, I guess I could start a social account. And again, it was it's funny because I feel in some ways it's always believe that women's sports can and should be really big business, but also to be, very honestly, day one of this company wasn't a grandiose vision. It was hey, I think I could, kind of tackle this first domino. And you touch on it. For me, I had been an athlete. I played in college and then I played professionally for a little bit in the NWSL and abroad. And that experience really led me to that belief in women's sports, of just seeing that people were really, really excited about women's sports. And, for me, it was women's soccer, but I'm a little bit on a tangent, but I saw some former Stanford football player last night, and we were talking about this, and he was a really big deal on campus at the time. He was a defensive end. This is when the Stanford football team was really good, and he was popular, and people knew who he was, and the football team was popular. And also, so was the women's soccer team. We had people that were coming to all our games. We were selling out. There was maybe once or twice where I forgot to leave, tickets for my parents, and they were upset because the game was sold out, got worked out. But for me, that was I didn't know anything different. I had been at this school where the sport that was sports that were popular was football, it was women's soccer, it was across the board. I was seeing, in women's soccer in different places that there was this interest and excitement. And so for me, when I stopped playing and was trying to be a fan, the just total lack of coverage made no sense. And that's really what led me to eventually starting Just Women's Sports.
Anybody can create an Instagram page, but going from that to having investors like Billie Jean King and David Blitzer and Joe Tsai, not anybody can do that. How did you go from the back of the cab creating the Instagram account to some of the biggest power players in our industry wanting to invest in what you were creating?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been really fortunate to bring on some great partners. I think for me, as much as it was like, hey, I believe in this space, anyone can start an Instagram. Really quickly, what I saw is that account went from like 0 to like 30,000 followers really quickly. And really, with me just posting content that I was excited about, speaking to the audience in a way that I would speak and talk about sports, and just seeing how quickly this was resonating and seeing the engagement. And I think really quickly, it went from being like, just a social media account to, okay, hold on. This is a whole, when we started, it was 4% sports coverage was dedicated to women's sports. And we were seeing that even with this groundswell, legacy players were not set up to prioritize the WNBA, to prioritize the NWSL. And we were seeing, really NFL, NBA coverage is, legacy players' bread and butter. And it's the audiences they're building and how they're working with sponsors, and their temples are, their temples. And so like that is the infrastructure that like really quickly I was like, that needs to be built in women's sports for this to be all it can be. And I want to go build that. And, I think I was fortunate of like getting connected to the right people early on, and people like, a Joe and Claire Sy, that when we were saying, hey, women's sports is here, it's going to be big. This is just, we're on the 1 yard line, and like, I want to grow and build. And I think building that audience is a really critical piece of it. They were just like, yes, yes, I'm with you. Let's do this. How do we make that happen? There was a lot of no's, to be clear, but I think there were people like the people you mentioned, David Blitzer, Michelle Kang, the Sy family, like they were like, yes, I get it. And now what? How do we go? And that's been really cool.
You said there was an account that you really admired. What was it?
House of Highlights.
Oh, yeah. Solid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you just didn't see a lot of women's sports on there.
Yeah, I think that account's amazing. And I think what Turner's done with it is amazing. It just, it's very NBA. And I was like, wait a minute, we could do that with women's sports.
It's an interesting time for creating content because the generations keep getting smaller in how they want to consume content. Like a 15-year-old versus a 20-year-old versus a 25-year-old. Like those are seemingly now three very different personality types, if I'm kind of painting with a broad brush, and how they want to consume content. Whereas 20 years ago, it was that would have all been part of almost the same kind of generation. How did you create something that seemingly can appeal to more traditional content consumers, but also kind of progressively younger content consumers who are into women's sports?
Yeah, I
Sports
think,
in general.
yeah, for us, it was always like, look, there is a next gen sports fan that is showing up in digital spaces and they want women's sports. And that's who we've been building for. And that's very much reflected in our audience. 80% of our audience is under the age of 34. And it's like 80 or 90% are consuming women's sports content every day via digital platforms. And so for me, and this is kind of fed into some of my comments around women's sports more broadly, is like, this is a next gen sports fan, and they're showing up on social, they're showing up on newsletter, they're watching YouTube videos. And so for us, it's always important to meet fans where they were at. And I think, I find myself like, I think people like to bucket people in, they watch long form or they watch short form. And I think the truth is it's a little bit of everything. I watch movies, and I also watch a lot of reels, and I also watch TikToks, and I also watch newsletters. And so for us, it was about, how do we meet fans where they're at? And so for us, it's always been like, we have to show up multiple places. I don't think we have the luxury of building on a single channel. We're going to have a multi-channel strategy. And I think that's been key. And I think that is important with building for sort of this growing fan base of sports fans.
You are, as we talked about, a former athlete. Does that in any way influence the way that you want to cover athletes?
This is a really good question. It's interesting. when I was an athlete, I like hated doing interviews. I like had, these make-believe feuds with journalists. Like, I really like was like, oh man, I don't like the media. And so I was talking to someone about this. It's funny to find myself in this position. In early days of Just Women's Sports, I was a big believer in let's just do athlete direct to fan. Like let's get out of the way. I want to hear first person, interviews. I want to hear first person essays. And I think there's a place for that. And I really like that type of content. I think what we realized early on is, every athlete has social media. They can be their own content creator. We love to be helpful and supportive, but that's not our role here. Our role is to onboard and build a casual fan. We always say it's like, I don't think we've met the majority of the women's sports audience. I think that's really exciting. We think it's our job to, yes, engage the current fan base, but onboard that next generation. And for us, that does mean like we have to be willing to cover the space and identify the moments that matter and deliver them in ways that like are, resonating with the audience and authentic. And there's times where like, I think the athletes don't love some of the headlines and stuff, or they want certain headlines to go away. And I think for me, it's always been about like, if we are doing what we believe in, which is like authentically covering women's sports, then we have to stand in it. And there will be moments where that is uncomfortable, or maybe an athlete wishes a story would just go away, or they don't want to ask those questions. But it's all a really necessary part of building this ecosystem. And for me, I think these women are like the best, and they compete at the highest level, and they deserve to get paid, and they deserve to not be big fish in small ponds, to be big fish in big ponds and make big dollars. Media is a very, very critical piece of that. And so that's the role we need to play. That's the role I want to play. And I also understand when there's times where it's like, I'm not going to love every headline. And I think that's okay. Again, as long as it's true for us that we are doing it authentically and with honesty and like living truly our values.
There are going to be some instances where an athlete might not love the headline. And then there are going to be some instances where it feels like a story is not good for the growth of women's sports. Certainly, there have been some of those, a few NWSL clubs or instances. Do you just have to cover those the same as anything else? Or
You have to.
Yeah.
You have to be honest. The audiences can tell. And I say this with talent we work with too. And it's like, the way we build this is we have to be honest about it. We have to have honest fan conversations. And that means there's going to be a ton of good and a ton to celebrate and a ton of joy. And also there's going to be stuff that is less fun or more critical or just straight ugly. You have to be willing to go to both places to really build authentic coverage. That's where I think like we have to be brave, and we want to like lead that charge. But I think you have to be honest in both scenarios.
Do you think the mainstream established media has gotten better since 2020 in covering women's sports?
Yes and no. So I think it's like, yes, I think we're seeing more women's sports. And I think a big thing for us is when we started in 2020, you couldn't find the games. Like finding a game was impossible. And now there's still issues with that. Like NWSL games are spread across multiple networks. But I think that's just sort of the world we live in. Your favorite TV shows are spread across multiple streaming services now. So I think we're more used to that as consumers. But in the digital landscape, we haven't seen the coverage from legacy players meaningfully move. And, it used to be 4%. I think it was last year there was a study, and it went from just under 5% to just over 5% from the legacy players. So for me, again, it just points to like, I'm happy to see more coverage on the legacy channels. It's not going to meaningfully shift. They're not going to deprioritize their main things, which are the NFL and the NBA. That's okay. It's not a game set up for us to win. Let's go play a different game.
When we have guests on our podcast, oftentimes they will feel the need to be more reserved, or there are certain opinions they might have, but they have to be careful about who they might upset. And I think as we were preparing for this and looking at some of your interviews and the things you published, you seem very willing and ready to go out on a limb, or to have that that big take. And that's not just right on your own platform. You had an op-ed in Sportico. Um, the headline was "The women's sports boom will end if we don't continue to build." And you seem like you don't shy away from the big take, I hate that word, but for lack of a better word. Um,
Let's take it.
um, do you think that's a fair classification? And is that how intentional are you? You said you hated being in the media as an athlete, but how intentional do you have to be now about having a louder voice in the space?
Um, it's funny hearing you say that I have a louder voice. I I believe women's sports can and should be and will be really, really big business. And I am not gonna like be quiet about how I think we need to get there. And I think that I feel really strongly that there's certain truths that like we just have to accept. There's certain things we got to get on the same page about. And like we need to go make this happen. Like this should be a massive industry. Like let's let go of anything that makes that not true and like let's go make it happen. And so um I don't think I try and be loud for loud's sake. I think I just have a lot of opinions. But yes, I think it's a fair classification.
What opinion, if you could only share one with the listeners here who haven't read or heard you before, what do you think you would want to tell them?
Well, I don't have like something super hot and new, but I do. I'm like very worried about a potential lockout for the WNBA. I just think there's so much momentum there. And I think we got to figure this out and we got to keep going and building. It is, we're talking about it a lot internally. I'm nervous about it. And I want to see these women get what they deserve. And I want to see the league continue to grow and build. And I want to see us figure it out and keep going.
When there is a story like that, how do you approach covering it while still maintaining the relationships and the access that I'm sure are beneficial for JWS?
Yeah. It's interesting because you find yourself, I think in sports media in particular, you want to you want to be able to like work with the athletes and the team, and you also want to be able to work with the league. And I think for me, again, it's like the guiding principle is just being honest and authentic. And as long as we do that and we're true to like our values, I think it's like then we deal with any of those repercussions. And I think the folks in the space, maybe because I've been doing it, I think they've come to know that that's just kind of like how I'm going to be in the space.
We're recording this in early to mid-September. So there's a chance by the time we publish it, things will have evolved. But as of now, if you looked in the crystal ball on this WNBA labor dispute, who do you think has to be the one that comes to the table to resolve it? How do they resolve it?
Oh, and I'm not trying to shy away from this. I don't know enough about like the X's and O's of this, but I do think it's in everyone's best interest for games to start in 26, on schedule. And so I think like everyone is on the same team and we just have to like figure out how we structure this so everyone can win. And like the growth and how much has changed in women's sports can be reflected in these deals. And listen, I think that is like a big thing. There is been a monumental shift in women's sports really like in the last year. And so I think like we are going to see a lot of shifting, a lot of deals change, the dollar amounts change, the way brands are spending change, talent fees change. And like, that's a good thing. That's what we've been wanting to build. And so when these moments happen, I think, it can be hard, but I think we have to solve them and move forward.
I think the prevailing belief of most sports fans is that when there is a Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese rivalry, it elevates the sport and it's great for media. In that case, do you sit around and kind of have a strategy meeting on like, okay, how much do we want to lean into, I'm going to use this word again, the hot takes around Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese? How much do we want to cover this in terms of straight news versus opinion pieces. How do you approach something like that as a news organization?
I think again, it's just really important. Like for us, it's like our guiding light is that we serve a casual fan. And so what is a casual fan really excited about? And they're excited about, the hottest storylines in the WNBA, which Caitlin's not playing right now, but when there was that rivalry and they were, going back and forth, there's a lot of interesting storytelling there. And I think that's a great thing that should be celebrated. And I think there's more exciting storytelling, outside of just Caitlin and Angel Reese. And so, like, I think for us, it's all about where are we seeing like excitement and interesting storylines. And, another thing that I always share is like, I very much believe sports are entertainment. I think they're really fun. And I think we should not be afraid to like lean into the joy and the hype. And, we say a lot internally, hype, not guilt, like lean into the things that make sports. And for me, the rivalries, players getting heated, players getting really competitive, the back and forth, that's what it's so fun. It was fun as an athlete. It's fun watching it from the outside. And so I really encourage my team, like, have fun in those moments. And like, we're never trying to be salacious or make something that's not there, but like it's fun when people compete. Like, let's have fun with it.
One of the things we hear a lot, I think more in the sponsorship space about women's sports, is this next generation of fans, which you talked about, but even like how meaningful and powerful it is for little girls to now grow up and not even realize that there was an era maybe before this where you couldn't find it on TV, like you said, or where there weren't the career paths that there are now. Are you ever thinking about the 8, 9, 10-year-old that might be finding your website for the first time and how to appeal to that, like even that young of a generation?
Yeah, I mean, listen, yes, of course is the answer. And I think for me, like my like idol growing up was Mia Hamm. And I use this example a lot. Like I loved her not because people were like, Mia Hamm is really good for soccer. 1 in 4 girls drop out of soccer before the age of 12. I liked her because she was so good. She was super cool. She had good hair. She was in hair commercials. Like, I thought she was just awesome. And I wanted to be like her. I wanted to play soccer like her. Like, that was the motivation in so many ways. And so for me, that's always been like such a lesson that I've taken with me and our approach to the content of like, I think our whole thing is like, you got to make women's sports cool and fun and exciting. And that is awesome for little girls. How cool is it to see these women being, confident and bold and having swagger and talking shit? Sorry if I can't say that, but like, that's what's like fun. And I think that is like so cool and aspirational for people. And I don't think telling 8 and 9-year-olds like, these women are great role models and they're really good for your confidence and self-esteem. Like, that's just like not interesting, And I think for me, that's like the coolest part of working in women's sports in a lot of ways is like, look, like if we just create really cool and fun sports content and we build this audience, there's all these downstream effects that are like really good for our culture. Like we know like the majority of women in the C-suite like played sports at a high level. We know all the benefits of sports for girls and boys. And so it's like, wow, like if we can like just make this cool and big, like this is just so good for the world. And like maybe that's too grandiose, but that's kind of like what I think about.
You can swear here. We don't have 8 or 9 or 10-year-olds listening to this podcast, I don't think. Although that being said, I am going to dance around how I phrase this question. During the WNBA season, a certain item started getting thrown onto the court regularly.
Yeah.
Were you like, oh my God, we have to cover this too because it's become a news story, even though I would assume a lot of eye rolling when it was initially starting. But was that just a case of like, all right, we have to cover this?
It was exactly that. Exactly that. Like, okay, we have to cover it in a lot of eye rolling.
Yeah, ridiculous. Besides the WNBA, besides the NWSL, what do you think that next women's sports league, that's going to boom? If you had to point to one, what would it be?
It's a good question. So I think we're seeing a lot of growth in volleyball in particular, like just so much happening there and, new professional league really forming. There's a ton in college softball right now, so really excited to see where that goes. But I think like my biggest thought is I still think there's just a lot more juice to be squeezed from basketball and soccer. And I think about this a lot. Like, this is like a small example, but like LeBron James has 160 million Instagram followers, and Alex Morgan has 13 million Instagram followers. And both are a lot, but it's just a reminder that, like, even the biggest athletes in women's sports, I think we have a long way to go in terms of like coverage and just how big this can all be. And so I think there's a ton more to be squeezed out of everything that's being built in the WNBA, everything that's happening in the NWSL. And so I'm excited to see, the growth of those leagues has been phenomenal. And I think, again, we're just at the starting line, and I think there's a lot more to go there. And also, I think we're seeing the rise of these other sports like volleyball, softball, lacrosse is another one. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, I think I think we are truly just at the starting line for some of these sports that are really just starting to break through. And I think I try and push my company like this too, is like, how do you just really focus on making this all it can be?
Is there a day when women's sports surpass men's sports in popularity?
I think so. And I don't say that like just to be crazy. Like, I think what's really encouraging about women's sports is, like, first off, just the growth rate across the board in terms of, viewership, attendance, sponsorship dollars coming in. Like, it's crazy. There's like so much happening. Everything is dramatically up and to the right. Where I'm really, really bullish on this space is that everything is going digital right now. And I think legacy media and some of these, legacy men's sports properties are trying to figure out, how do we go digital and how do we connect with this next gen audience? Women's sports is being built on digital. It is being built for a social first experience. It's not just being built for linear, but it's also being built for the 30-second highlight. That's great. And I think that's where the future of all this is going. And I think that this is sort of our opportunity of, like, one category is trying to pivot. The other category has the opportunity to build for this next gen fan. I think if we really focus and take advantage of that, women's sports as a category has everything it needs to be just as big, if not bigger, than men's sports.
Right now, you have the social channels, you have the website, obviously, you have the podcast, Sports Are Fun, with Kelly O'Hara, who I believe, is she a Tottenham fan?
Oh,
Do you
I
know?
believe so.
I think I'm a diehard Spurs supporter, and so there was something years ago where I feel like maybe it was when Alex played briefly for Tottenham, and I thought
Oh,
Kelly
maybe.
said she was, but I've kind of wanted to know ever since, is that like legit or not?
I'm about to go see her, so I'll ask her to confirm.
Um, but what's next? Like, when you look at the next 5 to 10 years, where do you see this headed? What else do you want to build?
Yeah, I think for us, like, what we're really like, when we first started, there was so much white space, which is really, really exciting. But I think it's, there's so many different directions you can go. I think as this industry is really starting to be built, we see where the real gaps are. And so for me, I think we're seeing that you can watch the games. Again, they're spread out, but watching the games, like, that's a very big unlock. And there's this groundswell of audience. I still think there's this big gap on digital. And that's the role we want to play, of connecting with, engaging, and onboarding fans in these digital spaces. And so I think for us, there's so much, everything in women's sports, I think, needs to be created. In the same way there was a media gap, I think there's gaps in commerce. I think there's gaps in betting, memorabilia. Like, I think everything's on the table. For us, we're really focused on growing and building that audience in these digital spaces. And I'm excited to see, where this whole thing goes.
Does that by necessity entail getting more investment, continuing to bring on partners who believe in that vision and are willing to fund a lot of new ventures, new risk?
I think we will have to continue to find ways to invest in growth. Does that mean we're going to have to go fundraise bring on new partners? Not necessarily, but yeah, I mean, I think a big shift also, though, is brands are really coming to the table in big ways. Brands are seeing the opportunity in women's sports and with this audience. And I think there's been a lot of brand partnerships that have been big unlocks for us. So we're going to have to continue to grow and invest. This is definitely a building phase. And, I hope many builders in women's sports see it that way too, that like we're not at the finish line, we're at the starting line. And this is the moment to, see what we need to do, put your head down, invest, build, make it happen. Exactly how we do that, I don't have all those answers right now, but yeah, we're really focused on how we build.
You have become a pro, I feel like, at doing these interviews. What I miss
No,
is there.
thank you.
Yeah, no. I was shocked earlier when you said you didn't like doing interviews when you were an athlete, because I've listened to a few of them, and really, you're so well spoken, and feel like you've been doing this for a long, long time. But is there anything I didn't ask? I mean, when the subject of women's sports broadly, but then also the coverage of it comes up, what haven't we talked about that you think is important?
No, I thought this was great. And I think a big thing that you asked me about was, how do you engage that 8 and 9-year-old? And I think that's been a big thing for me of just like no question I think you need to add, but like the thing I would double down on, I guess, is like I think the way we continue to grow and build is we make women's sports cool and fun and big and loud. And I'm excited to, hopefully play a big role in that.
All right. Well, I would love to end here with some rapid fire questions. And I'm gonna start with one piggybacking off of something I just talked about. Who is your football club that you support?
Angel City.
Is there any international club?
I mean, I'm like very basic. I like Chelsea.
Okay. Well, they're pretty successful.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, you said you have a 1-year-old when we were talking before this. I can't believe I didn't think to ask, boy or girl.
Boy.
Okay. So got to go for another now.
Yeah. Don't worry, I went to W All-Star and came back with a Caitlin Clark like t-shirt jersey thing, and it's so cute to see him in it.
Where when you do get to relax, where's your favorite place to travel?
Oh, wow. I live in Southern California and I love the beach. And so I like am really into staycation right now, a good beach day. Like it's been awesome. It's been a beautiful summer.
Do you have a book recommendation for us?
Um, my I love the Harry Potter series, so I just have to own that I'm a nerd. I've read them too many times. So if you haven't, I would recommend the Harry Potter series.
My daughter, who's 8, is on the 3rd book right now. We just
It's
went on. Have you gone on the Harry Potter, like the official website, to do the sorting?
Oh no. Oh my God, I need to do that.
Yeah, you can fill out a quiz and it'll sort you into a house. She, like her father and mother, is a Gryffindor.
Of
So
course, of course.
we're a strong Gryffindor home thus far. Um, you mentioned Mia Hamm as a person, kind of the hero growing up. I don't know if it'll be Mia Hamm related, but do you have a first memory of watching women's sports as a fan?
I actually do. It was in LA. It was when the LA Soul were playing, which was a previous iteration of the NWSL, and Marta was playing. And I remember seeing her live, and I had gone to a lot of Galaxy games. It was the Home Depot Center at the time, and I remember just having my mind blown watching women play on that field in that stadium, and it was like oh my gosh, like women can do this. And I don't remember how old I was. I was young, but that was like like stuff that sticks with you. It was like never a doubt for me that you could see women play on the big stage and people could be excited about it. But I remember watching Marta play and just being like, oh wow, this is different and that's cool.
That's great. If you could time travel back to that cab in 2020 and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Run. No. No. I'd say don't stress so much. It's okay. Can can get a lot done without all the stress.
Are you a don't sweat the small stuff person or a devil's in the details person?
Oh, I'm a devil's in the details person. Yeah, I am extremely type A.
And lastly, besides Just Women's Sports, what is your favorite publication to read?
Okay, does it need to be to read or can it be to listen to?
Consume, yeah. That's a
Okay.
better way to, yeah.
I've been really into TED Radio Hour. I go in and out of being into that show, but I'm like really back into it. I love putting it on a run and just getting lost in some topic. I think they do a really good job.
Okay, that's a good one. I'll have to send you in follow-up, not that it's radio hour, but AJ, our founder, did a TEDx talk
Oh, how
about
cool.
the power of sports to build community.
I love
Um,
that.
and I obviously am biased, but I think it's really good.
Send it to me.
Yeah,
My
I
next
will.
run. I'll give it a listen.
Well, I greatly appreciate you carving out some time as you run around the city to talk to me and tell your and Just Women's Sports story. I think it's really incredible what you have built, and it's pretty clear to see the potential of where it could go. And it's kind of one of those things. I feel like the most successful things are things that once they're built, you look back and you're like, how did nobody do this before? Right. And so that's genuinely kind of what I think a lot of navigators think about what you've done here. So congratulations on the success so far.
Jeff, thank you so much. This was so fun. Really enjoyed this conversation.
To our listeners, if you have any questions or comments coming out of this, please feel free to reach out to us either at my email, jeff@nvgt.com, or on my LinkedIn page or Navigate's website. But beyond that, just want to thank you again, Haley, and let everybody know, justwomensports.com and sports are
Like,
fun.
subscribe, follow, comment. Got to get my plug in.
Oh yeah, I was trying to tee you up. What do people always say? Sports are fun is the podcast available wherever. What do they say?
Wherever you get your podcast.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, it's great content. And so yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us on Navigating Sports Business. Please stay well.